everyone, it's Allie, and today I want to talk about the strategy I've been doing for the majority of 3.25 that's been probably one of the most lucrative strategies I've ever done. Today we're going to be talking about farming tier 17 maps with Harbingers. This is not going to be a strategy that is going to farm Harbingers in the way you normally expect Harbingers to be farmed, but we are instead going to be farming Scarabs. Where we're doing the strategy is we're going to be employing the use of First Wave plus the Regex I Scarab to have a 75% chance for every Harbinger in our map to be a King Harbinger. And because King Harbingers are just going to spawn so many monsters within each map, they're basically going to double, if not triple, the amount of total monsters that you see within a tier 17 map. Because a lot of the monsters from the Harbingers are going to be rare monsters, we can then utilize amplified artifacts along with a Honored Nemesis Scarab to get ourselves a lot of monster modifiers on every rare that we fight from these Harbingers, giving us a very high chance to see Scarabs. This is a unique way of farming Harbingers that I've never done before, and honestly it's been really fun given that all you're really selling at the end in terms of bulk loot is mainly just Scarabs, which are very easy to sell in one single bulk trade to people. Now, I know what some people might be thinking, that this is going to be a tier 17 strat and setting it up might be really annoying, but personally I haven't really found it too annoying as I haven't been trying to hit the super juiced maps that a lot of people are going for. Instead, I've just been doing it with the bare minimum possible setup, and it's been making me quite a lot of money per hour. Now, before we do go any further, I do want to mention that this will be a tier 17 strategy, and if you've never done tier 17 before, you're going to need a very well put together character to be able to handle these maps, especially given that every rare is going to have 2 additional modifiers on them. We are going to be putting a delirium more about every single one of these maps, and you can potentially see multiple Harbingers within the same screen, potentially overwhelming you with rares. This is not going to be a strategy for the faint of heart, but if you do have a build that's strong enough to be able to do this, you'll be making quite a lot of money doing the strategy. So with all that said, let's quickly go over the passive tree that you'd want for the strategy. The passive tree is going to be very simple here. We simply just want to add as many rares into our map as possible. Obviously, we're going to be doing that by picking up the 3 Harbinger nodes, which are just required for this build, but we're also going to be adding in all of the beyond nodes as well. We're going to be spawning a lot of monsters within a very tightly dense area due to us killing Harbingers. So all the beyond nodes with Endless Tide basically makes it so we get a lot of beyond monsters within each map, giving us probably somewhere around an additional 30 to 40 rares per map. We're then going to be pairing all this up with all of these Scarab nodes in the tree, as Scarabs are, well, what we're going to be farming here. So we're going to want to make sure we get skittering swarms for the increased Scarabs from our maps. We're going to want to get ourselves remarkable relics for less common varieties of Scarabs, meaning on average each Scarab is worth more money. Obviously, we're going to need amplified artifacts, as that's what this whole farming strategy is going to be based around. And then we're going to finally pair this up by picking up a few of the more chance for specific Scarabs to drop, as these, at the time of recording this, are the ones that are worth all the money. The rest of the tree is simply just going to be picking up as much map modifier effect as we possibly can on all of the slants of the tree, along with mounting modifiers and chisel perfection, as these are very good points in terms of additional map effect, which is going to make our maps substantially harder, as we are going to basically double the effect of all the modifiers on our tier 17 maps, while at the same time giving us substantially more pack size and quantity, giving us even more Scarabs than before. Finally, to add on to this, we are going to want to specifically pick blue altars for our strategy, because blue altars are going to give you the highest chance to see the Scarab duplication node, which does work with everything that we're doing here, meaning if you do get one within your maps, you're effectively getting 30 to 40% more currency for that map, depending on when you get the altar. The passive tree for this is very simple, and you can cull a few points if you do not have 132 points to do the strategy, but highly recommend to go get all of your passive points before doing the strategy, especially given that this is going to be a tier 17 strategy. We're going to want to juice your maps as much as possible. If you do need to give up a few points, what you could possibly do is simply just drop significant troves, as we don't really encounter too many unique monsters within these maps, as well as a little bit of emerging radius on this beyond wheel, or you could potentially just drop some of the quant nodes, or potentially a few of the map modifier nodes, as we are connecting to the middle in 2 separate ways. So with that out of the way, let's talk about how to actually set up our maps. First off, we need to pick which tier 17 map we're going to want to run for the strategy. Now, realistically, you could do any of them. I have personally done a strategy on nothing but Fortress and Sanctuary, because the build that I did the majority of my farming with was specifically a build that preferred those 2 maps, and I couldn't really kill the Ziggurat boss. But if you can handle Abomination, and especially if you can handle Ziggurat, I would highly recommend for you to pick one of those 2 maps. These 2 maps are going to have a bias towards dropping reality fragments, which are currently worth somewhere around 2 divines each, as well. Uber Maven is very, very lucrative. Around 40 to 60% of the time, you're going to either get yourself a reality fragment or one of the other 2, and ideally, because of that, you'd want to pick Ziggurat, as the devouring fragment is also worth somewhere around a div and a half as well. Just specifically picking Ziggurat over everything else is going to give you substantially more money per hour with the strategy, but even if you do just want to do something like Fortress, you're still going to be making quite a lot of money. So honestly, just pick the map that you're going to be doing based off of which boss in the tier 17 maps you feel like you can handle the best. Now, with this map, we are going to have to roll it. If you have never done tier 17 rolling before, welcome to hell. This is unfortunately the only bad portion of this whole strategy, is that We unfortunately have to roll a tier 17 map with mods that we can either do or mods that don't break us, or in our specific case, a very specific implicit that if we do not have on our map, we will make substantially less currency. What we're looking for on this map is the more scarab implicit at the top. Now, a lot of people who have been doing similar strategies are trying to go for very specific amounts. Personally, as long as it's 50% or higher, because sometimes it does have a chance to roll 33%, I just run the map. Sometimes you will end up getting a set of mods together on your map that's going to give you 100% increased more scarabs on your tier 17 map. But personally, I would say that rolling for any specific number really is not worth your time. The other thing to mention about this is that you're going to have a lot of really bad tier 17 mods that are simply just going to make your life hell in these maps. What I'd recommend for you to do is to come over to poe.re, which will be linked in the description below, and I would recommend to go through all of the tier 17 map modifiers and pick as many of the bad ones that you simply either don't want to do or break your build and add them to a regex. You're not going to want to fully fill this regex up, because what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking this regex and we are simply just going to be typing in here, and at the end of it, we're simply just going to be typing as much of the word scarab as possible, which is then going to specifically make sure that your map will only highlight if it has the more scarab implicit at the top of it. This is not going to be a catch-all, and this is where you're gonna have to do a little bit of learning if you've not done a tier 17 map. And unfortunately, I cannot tell you exactly which map mods to run on your tier 17 maps, as some builds have more mods that they can't do than others. So it's really going to be down to a learning curve for you and learning which mods you can't do. Again, we don't care about pack size, we don't care about quant. The only thing that we need on this map is for the map mods to not completely brick our build and for the map to actually seem doable, and for it to have at least 50% or higher more scarabs as an implicit. Now, if it's your first time doing a tier 17 map, just to give you a quick crash course on some mods that you really want to avoid because they just feel horrendous. Some examples might include things such as Drowning Orb, Bloodstained Saw Blades, players are marked for death, rares remove percent of life on hit, deal no damage for 3 seconds out of 10 seconds, and especially AoE. Please do not run a more AoE or less AoE map because you will have a horrible time. Less AoE in most cases actually ends up breaking a lot of things. For example, in my build, I was running Flesh and Stone, and well, my Flesh and Stone literally becomes smaller than my character's foot. Another good example of not wanting to run increased AoE is specifically goat maps. Now, tier 17 maps have a different set of monsters that they can pull from as the default monsters in the maps, and a lot of those are either map bosses or just very, very horrendous monsters that are just not fun to fight. If you know the map boss in Glacier, the goat that jumps around 3 times and then stops for a few seconds before jumping again, that is one of the core monsters in the map pool, meaning if you ever end up getting the goats on a increased AoE map, the goat's slam will be so large that it will literally off-screen you, effectively breaking your map and making it impossible for you to actually finish it. Please do not run AoE, especially with Harbingers, as it's going to feel horrendous. You can try it if you want to, but you've been warned that it's going to feel bad. Now, what I'd recommend for you to do is if you end up getting yourself something around 80 or 90% more scarabs or higher, is to go to the auction house and buy yourself 4 Maven's Chisels of Scarabs. These are going to multiply the amount of scarabs that your map gives you. And one important thing about this is that it's going to also be multiplied by all the map modifier effect that we pick up. For example, if I were to take a 100% more scarab map, chisel it with 4 Maven Scarab Chisels, it would go to about 210%. And then that 210% would then be multiplied by map modifier again to something like 360% more scarabs. Those are going to be the super juicy maps, and even if they do seem a little bit annoying to do, I would highly recommend for you to potentially grit your teeth and get through it because it's going to give you substantially more money. Now, please don't fall into the trap of potentially forcing yourself to do a map that seems way above your current caliber, as I've personally done the same thing, just wanting to chase a 150% more scarab map and just end up breaking the map because it was simply too difficult for my build to handle, with the mod just making it a little bit too painful. Make sure that the map is doable, because you simply losing a map because the map mods are horrendous is going to make you lose more money than you would have gained from the more scarab implicit. Finally, once you're happy with the map they're going to run, make sure you put a Delirium Orb on your map, as this is going to give us more monsters. They're going to spawn from both the Harbingers, the Beyond monsters, and from all the cysts on the ground, which then just gives us more rare monsters to get, well, more scarabs from. If you feel like you can't handle this, you don't have to put a Deli Orb on your map. This is simply optional, but if you can handle Deli Orb, definitely put at least 1 Deli Orb on there for the additional loot that that's going to offer you. Now that we've got gotten that out of the way, let's talk about the scarabs that we're actually going to want to run in this setup. The setup is going to be very simple. We're going to want to run one Horned Scarab of Nemesis because our strategy is going to revolve around amplified artifacts, which gives us 50% increased chance for a rare monster to drop a scarab per modifier on them. We're then going to be pairing this up with a Harbinger Scarab of Regency, which is going to give us a 50% chance for each Harbinger in our map to become a King Harbinger, which when added on with First Wave gives us a 75% total chance for each Harbinger to be a King Harby, which is going to give you substantially more monsters to kill than a normal Harbinger. And then finally, we're going to be adding on 3 normal Harbinger Scarabs for an additional 12 Harbinger within our maps. There's nothing else we'd want to potentially run in this, and there's no other variation of this. We're just going to keep it short and simple with very cheap Scarabs outside of the Regency one being a little bit more expensive than the other ones. And we're simply just trying to put as many Harpies as possible in our map. Finally, from the map device, you're going to want to make sure you select Harbinger, as that's going to give us a few additional Harbingers on our map. And all of those Harbingers can also benefit from the Regency Scarab, making the strategy overall even better. And with all that put together, you're simply ready to run your map. In terms of running it, it's going to be, well, very simple. You can potentially choose to rush the boss if you want to, as that is going to then remove all of the boss altars from the pool of altar mods, meaning you have a higher chance of seeing the Scarab duplication altar. And outside of that, you're simply just trying to clear the map as efficiently as possible, making sure you stop at every Harbinger, killing all the rares that they spawn, and picking up all the Scarabs along the way. These maps are designed to last you somewhere around 10 minutes or so. There really isn't any specific time that you're trying to hit here. It's just you simply want to clear it as fast as you can. And as long as you just kill all the monsters, interact with everything in the map, and pick up all the altar mods that seem reasonable to you and worth your time, you really cannot do the strategy incorrectly. And finally, let's talk about the profits that you can see from the strategy. This is all the loot that I got from 13 maps of the strategy. As you can see, the majority of it is mostly just going to be made up by Scarabs. We're also going to have a little bit of bubblegum currency here, such as some Vol Orbs or some currency here and there. But the vast majority of everything you're going to get here is just going to be Scarabs. These are going to basically make up 70% of the total profit from the strategy, with the other 30% being some various maps you're going to get here and there, along with all of the Uber fragments that are going to drop from the boss, and a little bit of bubblegum currency and things such as fracturing shards. Now, personally, I decided to favor Silo for this map, as you are going to get yourself quite a lot of raw map drops as well. Currently, Silo sells for a decent amount of money, or what you can simply do with all your maps is simply just feed them to your map runners in King's March and get a little bit of extra profit from there. Because the strategy is making somewhere around 150,000 gold an hour, that does mean you can very easily sustain your King's March while at the same time being able to upgrade it to full, just like I did. Before I started the strategy, my King's March was pretty far behind, but after doing this for a few hours, I had more than enough money to fully upgrade everything in my town all the way to level 11. If you want to look in Wealthy Exile very quickly, as we can see that the majority of the profits here is just purely Scarabs. You're going to get yourself a little bit of currency, which is mostly just the tainted currency, as well as other raw bubblegum currency, which is really easy to sell in the auction house if you want to liquidate down. And then we're also going to have a little bit of fragments from the map boss itself. And then finally, we have a few other random items here and there, such as a few random div cards and a few random essences and maps. In total from the strategy, we got 41 div worth of total loot. If we want to look at the map cost for this, it cost me somewhere around 0.6 to 0.7 div per map that I ran. Now, all this was on Fortress, and currently most T17 maps in bulk are worth somewhere around this. But if you were to do something like Ziggurat, for example, you might end up paying 0.8 div per Ziggurat, as the boss fragments are worth a little bit more money. But realistically, you just pick whichever map is going to feel the most comfortable for you. Your total income would be a little bit higher. I think in my case, I probably would have made somewhere around 45 to 47 div if all this was done on Ziggurat instead of all this being done in Fortress. So do keep that in mind when choosing whichever map you want to run. For Scarabs, it did cost me somewhere around 35 chaos or 0.2 div for every single Scarab that I need for this, including the map device cost. And I assume somewhere around 0.1 div or so for the map rerolling. When I initially recorded this video, there was no changes done to the game for 3.25, but at the time of recording this section, they have currently nerfed tier 17 maps to where they removed a bunch of modifiers from them, making it a little bit easier to roll. I, on average, was assuming it took me somewhere around 15 to 20 chaos orbs to reroll each T17 map, and that should be a little bit lower now, given that a lot of the bad mods that you basically had to reroll away anyways are completely removed from the pool. In terms of total income, I ended up getting myself 41 div in total raw loot, which again might be a little bit higher if you ended up doing this on Ziggurat or on Abomination for the Maven fragments instead. It costed me somewhere around 13 div or so for all the supplies needed for the strategy. And if you want to look at the profit, I made 28 div in 13 maps, or 2.15 div profit per map that we did. If you want to look at this in terms of profit per hour, if I were to do 10-minute maps, I'm making somewhere around 12.9, or if you just want to round it, 13 div per hour. What I want to say about this figure from the about 30 or so maps that I did before collecting 13 maps for the strategy is I would say this number is actually a little bit underselling the strategy. I did not get anything lucky during the 13 maps that I did. I did end up getting myself one decent fracture base, which sells for about 100 chaos or so, and a flask that ends up going for about a divine 2, which are not included in this price check. And from all the maps I've previously done, I end up getting myself a jewel that's worth something, such as a natural instinct or a blood notch. Actually, fairly often, these harbingers create so many rares that you'll end up seeing unique jewels fairly often. At the same time, there's also always just big drops that you can randomly get as you go along. For example, and I think the 3rd or 4th map that I ever did of this strategy, I ended up getting myself a 7 years bad luck. And there's quite a lot of just random big drops that you can get along the way. Obviously, I'm not going to include them in this price check, but this is something to keep in mind. You are realistically gonna most likely over time expect yourself to make a little bit more than this just due to the raw drops of the map itself. Overall, I think this is a solid strategy given that it's very easy to put together. You just have to get through the pain of rolling your T17 maps. And after that, you're simply just farming a bunch of harbingers and it feels really fun. And in terms of liquidating, you're having a great time given that you're, well, just basically liquidating nothing but scarabs and a few bits of raw currency. I've had a great time with the strategy and I'll probably end up doing a little bit more of it before I move on to another strategy just because I honestly think it's pretty much one of the best strategies you could do this season, given how most other strategies are only making somewhere around 7, 8, 9 div an hour at most with high intensity. If you have any questions on any of this, feel free to leave a comment in the comments below and I'd be more than happy to help you as soon as I can. I also stream on Twitch every single day, so feel free to come by Twitch and ask any of your questions there. And with all that said, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day and I hope to see y'all kitties in the next video.